Hey everyone, it's Mr. Kim Singh. We're looking at what's new in Year 11 Maths in 2019. Let's jump into it.
Why would they change math? Math is math. Math is math.
So I'm really excited because it's the first time that all of the Year 11 and 12 Maths courses have been refreshed since, before I was born really. Now I won't be able to talk about every single detail of the changes that has happened because there is quite a lot of them, but what I aim to do is give you an overview of these courses, what they're about, what these topics are, and any major changes that happened. So there's 3 courses you can choose from in Year 11, Standard, Advanced, and Extension. So head to the one that's relevant for you because they all have different things that are new. But before you do that, there is something in common between them all. And the first thing that's in common is that in Year 11 now, you are required to do some sort of an assignment or investigation style assessment. So maybe that means going outside and measuring things with trigonometry, or maybe you'll do some data collection and do some statistical analysis on that. The other thing that's in common between all of them is that in terms of looking at the past papers from the old version of those courses, we can still use them, but we have to be very, very careful when we're picking them because some of them may have had the orders rearranged, some of them might have had the topics within them changed, some of them, those topics might have been taken out completely. So just be very careful when we're looking at those past papers. Alright, let's start off with Standard. Now this course was refreshed in 2018, and if you compare the old syllabus to the new syllabus, you'll notice the first thing is that the topics are now very streamlined. For the most part, a lot of those topics are very similar, but there has been some moving around in terms of taking some Year 12 topics, putting them into Year 11, and for some parts there are even completely new concepts that you'll have to learn. Right, first topic is algebra. Now this is traditionally a course that the standard students have struggled with, so that's something that you definitely want to get down pat early on. You've been working with algebra for a long time in high school, but there's a particular focus now on looking at particular equations that we can see in the world around us. So maybe it's calculating the blood alcohol content level using various formulas, or maybe the correct dosage for you for various types of medicines. And these just are a few examples of what you may find in this topic. Now there's also a big focus on what we call linear relationships. So if you recognize this equation here, y equals to mx plus c, it's looking at, okay, we've got this y value, how is it changing as our x variable is changing? And this may come up in things like, okay, what's the relationship between your height and your arm span? Or maybe even converting between different currencies and things like that. And then we have measurement, which has your usual perimeter and area kind of questions, but we also have different things like, oh, how about energy usage in the household? Does it use electricity if you leave your charger on at the power point? And we have some new stuff in Year 11 Standard for the first time, something called the trapezoidal rule, which helps us find the area of more complex kind of shapes, as well as looking at the consumption of food and the joules and kilojoules that we eat, what's the recommended intake, and how do we convert between those various units. Within that topic is also working with time. So that's looking at different time zones. If I want to schedule a meeting with someone overseas, when's the right time to do that? And we also get to look at a new topic of timetables. So reading timetables that you would see in the world around you. Maybe it's public transport, or maybe it's for other various things. Now financial mathematics is another topic that you guys have, and I love looking at this because it's very relevant to students. We're looking at so putting money into a bank and getting interest from it, but also if I buy something, that item loses its value over time. That's something we call depreciation. And we also get to look at a whole heap of other things like why do we need to pay taxes? Well, they help pay for teachers like me in schools, and even things like buying your first car, like insurances that you need and the cost that it may incur as well. Now, although this content may not necessarily be new, what is new is that within this topic, and actually all the topics, there's a big focus on using technology. So be prepared to be applying these concepts that you're learning in class to some maybe Excel or some graphing software and things like that. Our last topic in Standard is statistical analysis. Now this contains stuff like your mean, medians, and modes, but we also get to now explore a lot of current issues in society, like how do people use graphs to represent or maybe misrepresent certain ideas? And what's the relationship between global warming and pirates? Or is there a relationship? Maybe we have to dig a bit deeper to see what's actually going on underneath the surface there. And within that statistical analysis topic is also probability. So that's your usual, okay, what's the probability of flipping so many heads in a row or rolling a certain number of numbers in a row? But you also get to explore some more interesting questions like what's the probability of having the same birthday as someone in your class? Or the chance of finding a 4-leaf clover in your backyard? Well, I've never found one, so it's obviously not very hard for me. In terms of new content from this topic, you'll get to explore things called Pareto charts and modality, just to name a few of them. That's an overview of Standard and what's new in there. Let's move on to advanced. All right, for maths advanced, I want to start off by, again, comparing the old course topics to the new course topics. And again, the first thing you'll notice is that the courses have really been streamlined a lot. Now, although some of these have just been renamed and reshuffled, there are two big changes that I want to talk about first. The first one is that plane geometry, that whole topic has just been taken out. See you later. That's stuff like your congruency and similarity proofs, some angle properties, and a lot of that geometry that you would have learned in early high school as well. Now, just a word of warning, that doesn't mean you throw everything out the window, because in the trigonometry topic, you may need to call upon some of those angle properties to solve various problems. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, what's new and fresh is that statistical analysis is now in Mathematics Advanced for the first time. This contains stuff that you've seen before, like probabilities, true diagrams, Venn diagrams, and things like that. But there's also some new content, like discrete probability distributions. Now that may seem like a big scary term, but we can break down what that actually means. Discrete, that's a whole number thing. Probability, that's what's the chance of something happening. And distribution, well, that's just kind of graphing something, right? So we're looking at graphing the chances of things happening, where the results are whole numbers. So maybe that's, what are the outcomes on rolling 2 die? Or, the probabilities of flipping a certain number of heads. If you want to think about what things might be continuous, it could be things like time. What's the chance of waiting a certain amount of time on customer support, for example? In Australia, potentially quite a long time. And you guys will get to look at that in year 12. Like I said, those are the big major changes, but there's also a few changes within the other topics as well. Now, functions is something that you've actually seen before. Y equals to x, y equals to x squared. These are equations which belong to a family of what we call functions. And we're going to formalize what these actually are. We're going to look at whole new functions that you might not have even seen before. And we're also going to introduce some notation that you can use with that to help you in later topics too. Trigonometric functions has skills that you've used before in year 7 to 10. So using sine, cos, and tan to find the lengths of various things. But we also find out these ratios, sine, cos, and tan, also belong to those family of functions that we were talking about. And we'll look at graphing those and things like that. What's also new is that they moved the topic from year 12 into year 11, and that's called radians. So it's about changing our perspective of how we measure angles, because usually if you use a projector, you take a point and then you kind of measure it out to see how big it is. Radians kind of flips that around and it looks at, okay, let's take the perspective from the outside. What's the distance that's covered there? That's actually going to help us measure the angle. Calculus, which is the bread and butter of this course, is the study of finding gradients at certain points on a curve, but it's also so much more than that. It allows us to find instantaneous speeds and allows us to address a lot of hard problems that we'll need in future topics as well. Exponential and logarithmic functions. Now you can see how important functions is because a lot of the topics that we're learning about are functions. Now there's a big focus in Mathematics Advanced on how to apply these concepts into situations we see in real life, and we call that modeling. Exponential growth, for example, we can see that in a whole heap of places, whether it's how diseases spread in a country, or how money grows in your bank account, or how computing power gets more powerful over time. Even something simple as making a cup of coffee, putting it out and seeing how it cools over time, we can model that using something called the exponential function. Okay, so those are the topics in Mathematics Advanced and the major changes that have happened there. Finally, we come to Extension 1. Now, the important thing to note about Extension 1 is that this is actually 2 courses. You're studying 2 units of Advanced Maths and 1 unit of Extension 1. So all those assessments and topics that advanced students do, you'll have to do them as well. So make sure you've also watched what's new in the advanced section of this video as well. Again, let's just compare the old Year 11 Extension course and the new one as well. You can see it looks a lot more slim for the new course. That's because they've taken a lot of those topics out. So what have they taken out? Circular geometry, angles between 2 lines, internal and external division of lines, and harder to unit. These are all topics that are gone. See you later. So what's in to replace it? Well, for the first time in the New South Wales syllabus, we have something called the pigeonhole principle, which is essentially a law of logic. So you get to work with some problem solving and some proofs and things like that. We've also taken an Extension 2 topic, so drawing graphs, and put in Extension 1. So that's looking at things like, okay, can we do some different kinds of graphical manipulations, like adding and subtracting graphs? What would that look like? Or taking the absolute value. That's a topic that you'll see for the first time in Year 11 Extension 1. What they've also done is they've taken a lot of the Year 12 topics and moved them into the Year 11 course. So some examples of that: inverse trigonometric functions, further exponential growth and decay, and the binomial theorem. These are now in the Year 11 course for Extension 1. Now I just want to talk about harder to unit because in the old Extension 1 course, this was essentially a topic which took 2 unit, or now called advanced topics, and made them a lot harder. Now this is taken out. Keep in mind, a lot of these advanced topics, what they do in Extension 1 is they do actually extend them still. So you'll find that within your textbooks, within the advanced topics, there may be some exercises or chapters which have Extension 1 content. So let's keep that in mind. So what are these topics actually about in Extension 1? I've talked a bit about functions already. We've got that drawing graph skill, but there's also some other new stuff. We're going to look at a special type of function called a polynomial and some of the identities and patterns that we see with those. In the trigonometric functions topic, we're going to take our knowledge from advanced and extend it even further. So we're going to look at those trig functions again, but we're also going to look at some identities and relationships between those various trig functions that you might not have expected between them. And like I mentioned, we'll also get to look at inverse trig in year 11 now. You might have seen this button before. This is the inverse of sine. You would have used that to calculate the angles of things, for example. But what you might not realize is this is actually a function. This is a graph that you could draw as well. And we're going to look at how to do that in this topic. And in calculus, like some of those other topics, we're going to extend our knowledge of advanced even further because the world around us is quite complicated. So simple equations sometimes just don't cut it. We have to use modified equations. And that's what we look at in further exponential growth and decay. And we also get to see how calculus is applied to motion problems and heading towards more that physics domain as well. And last but certainly not least, we have something called combinatorics, and I just love saying that because it sounds so cool. But combinatorics is essentially looking at the combinations and arrangements of certain things. There's been a lot of password leaks online lately, so it's looking at things like how many possible passwords are there anyway, or what's the chance of having the same mobile phone number as someone? Will we run out someday? And things like that. Within this topic is also that binomial theorem that was moved from year 12 into year 11. And the binomial theorem is essentially looking at, hang on, there are patterns of expansion when I expand things like this. Is there a way that I can easily expand for higher powers rather than just writing them out a whole heap of times, right? Alright, so that's a whirlwind tour through the year 11 maths courses for 2019 and beyond, standard, advanced, and extension. Like I mentioned earlier, I couldn't go through everything that's new in all those minor details, but if you'd like to see something in more detail, leave a comment below and tell me what you'd like to see more of or what you'd like to know more about. Until the next one.